everybody settle an argument for us. Like, would we be better off if we did an actual podcast that was like the Invincible cast or whatever the hell dumb name you would give it? Like, is that going to get us more clicks than doing this on a YouTube channel? I don't know. Like every new show, like there's a billion Stranger Things podcasts.
Yeah.
There's Westworld podcasts. Like, is this small enough that people would just be like, this is the one I'll click?
You know what? That's a good question. But also with this show, I don't think this is the right show for us to do it because you're the only one that's read the comics. I think I would have to read the comics because I think you want to make that correlation. You want to go back to the comics and kind of talk about what is similar and what differs. But at the same time, like with Westworld, the great thing about a Westworld podcast is even though season 3 kind of sucked ass, like having a Westworld podcast, you could just dive deep into like fan theories, Reddit threads, things like that. This, everyone kind of like knows for the most part what's going on, especially if you read the comics.
This would definitely be less painful than a Westworld podcast because there are far fewer, like super inane, nothing clues in the background. So
yeah.
For that reason and that reason alone, Invincible is already better than Westworld. So we're in episode 2. So if you haven't seen our first episode recap, just check out our channel. It's there. Also, if you want to catch us talking about all other things pop culture, you can find us at the Chunkcast on all social media platforms. And we are a podcast everywhere you find podcasts. So, Mark, give me your high-level thoughts on episode 2 of Invincible.
Oh, shit didn't slow down, especially with the opening of this episode. It did not make you forget what happened at the end of episode 1. Kicks off with them scooping up intestines and fucking brains on the floor. Just like, holy shit. But overall, I did like we in the first episode, what we didn't really mention in our previous recap was kind of the whole background of Mark and like what was going on with his life and how he was juggling his parents and the aspect of his like mom not having these superpowers and his dad having them and him getting the powers and trying not to talk down his mom and his mom, make him more humble and realize like, hey, you still got to live in this world with us regular humans. And then he's also juggling high school, a job, things like that. So episode 2, I think we get a better look into his life. I mean, Adam and Eve comes into play more, which we'll get into. Kind of start to see that there's some chemistry going on there. But it was a different episode, but it still hit on the intense parts that episode 1 hit on with all the gore and things like that. We just get a better look at that.
I do feel as though this is more of a filler episode. And I think that if they didn't have these, that they would have released them just like one episode a week, as opposed to they had to go 1, 2, 3. Because first of all, if you had just tried to wrap this up all into episode 1, it would have made it boring.
Yeah.
So the idea that you are pumped up on episode 1, you go into episode 2. Episode 2 is just like, okay. Then you get to episode 3 and you're like, all right, let's keep this rolling. So for me, this was a little more boring. Again, I'm the one who's read the comics. Mark, you have not. And I love the idea that we have somebody who has read it and who hasn't. So we've got like a fresh perspective from either side. So I'm good with that. But what we have mostly in this episode is Omni-Man in a hospital bed and the Flaxans. So the Flaxans are this alien race who decides that, hey, we're just going to fucking teleport to the middle of New York City and we're going to start tearing your shit apart. What they don't know is that they have a different temporal cadence, I guess is the best way I can describe it. And they spend a couple minutes there and they're really fucking shit up in downtown New York City. And then all of a sudden, like, oh no, I'm old as fuck. I can't hold this gun anymore.
Yeah.
I have gray hairs in my pubes and shit. So yeah. It gives Mark, our main character, a really good chance to show up, beat the shit out of something, and also have to realize, like, I think later in the episode, Robot refers to it as like the more mundane side of superheroing, or maybe like the more realistic side, where like, hey, you tried to save this old woman and you can move at the speed of light, but if you move her at the speed of light, she's going to get all fucked up. So again, we get the juxtaposition of being a superhero and also Mark speaking with his father and his father saying, this is all part of the job.
Mhm.
Like Mark shows up and the old woman who he tried so desperately to save eventually passes away during the episode while he's not there. And Omni-Man walks up and is so nonchalantly saying, it's part of the gig, man.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think when you mentioned part of the gig and Omni-Man being in his bed in a coma at this point, I think of Alan the Alien too. We get a scene with this random ass character where Mark is like, "All right, I got to go take care of this." This Alan the Alien, correct me if I'm wrong, Smithers, comes to planets to basically face off against their strongest opponent.
See, he's coming. First of all, this is voiced by Seth Rogen, who is one of the producers of this show.
Great.
And he basically is supposed to go planet to planet, making sure that each planet has someone there who is capable of defending them from invaders. So what you come to find out once he finally slows down and talks to our hero, Mark, that he's looking for Urath, and he actually went to Earth.
Does that happen in the comics?
Yes, it does.
It's just like, actually, sorry, I fucked up.
And I, again, like we're trying to do this knowing that I've read the comics. I'm doing my best not to spoil it. In the comics, you get a much deeper dive into Alan the Alien's background. I don't know that you're going to get this here. I think it's a very interesting character, so that I hope that we do, but
I think we might.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
It depends. Like I know how many issues of this comic there are, but I also know like the pace that they're at right now. So are they shooting for, hey, I'm going to do 10 seasons of this and branch out and explore all these other things? I mean, this comic has been out for 20 years. So you would think that since then, Kirkman and Corey, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his last name, have also had other ideas. So maybe we'll get to explore some of the stuff we haven't seen in the books. I don't know.
Yeah, I absolutely hope that this goes more than 3 seasons. I think based on how many issues there are out right now. And do you feel like the pace they're at right now is way ahead of how the comics were, or vice versa?
I was conflicted by this point because in episode 1, you see Omni-Man go berserk and kill everybody.
Yeah.
So that made me think they were going way beyond, but also they kind of held back the introduction for Invincible and Adam Eve to this episode, and that's sooner. So I guess they're kind of just picking and choosing which timeline they're on for this, which I have no problem with. I mean,
which is fine. Yeah.
I think it's great. Like we talk about this all the time. You can't do exactly what the comic books say, because then the comic book nerds are like, I already know this story. But also, if you don't stick closely to it, they'll just be like, well, this isn't what I read in the comics. And then they get all sad and cry and review bomb you on IMDb.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Yeah, I heard also that Mark, like him getting to the point of being invincible in the comics, it was fairly quick. Like, didn't he get his powers kind of quick and became invincible? In this, I mean, even though it was still in episode 1, like he still had to deal with things where he didn't have his powers and all that kind of crap.
I think the best part of episode 2 to me, and we talked about how John Hamm was kind of a throwaway character in episode 1. Episode 2, you see, okay, so Mark discovers his powers. All of a sudden, he has just tossed a bag of garbage from the burger joint that he's working in into England.
Yeah.
And it falls basically on John Hamm's character.
To start episode 2.
So I think it would be much more difficult in a television series to be like, we're going to wait and see when his powers come in, as opposed to the comic book where you've got a build up. You've got a background that you can sell. And as long as the first 2 issues are good, people will stick through the first trade.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should talk a little bit about Cecil Stedman too.
Okay, voiced by Walton Goggins, if you didn't know. Walton Goggins, if you don't know, is the guy with the giant forehead. He's always the bad guy with the Southern accent. He was the bad guy in the first Ant-Man movie. He was in Righteous Gemstones as Uncle Baby Billy.
Tomb Raider.
Yes. I mean, he's been the villain, basically everything, but he's a great actor, by the way. Love his voice. He's super good.
So he kind of heads the whole,
the GDA,
the whole Guardians of the Globe, the Guardians, what organization, I guess.
So they are a government entity. And there are certain scenes in episode 2 where you see like Invincible show up with the old woman he's trying to save. He shows up in the entry room of the hospital, and these guys who were cloaked with invisibility just all of a sudden uncloak and point their guns at him, and they're like, freeze, who the fuck are you? So you know that they have some shit that they can't really share with the superheroes, but also they're kind of like, I'm trying to compare it to something that's like Men in Black if Men in Black had superheroes. Like they had Agent K, who was Rip Torn, just like back at the headquarters telling them what was going on, who is Cecil. And then you've got the guys out on the front lines who were like, Will Smith and whoever else he was partnered with in any given movie. So
what's with the teleporting shit? Is it true that like the teleportation aspect of like when he's just like, all right, I'm out of here, and he just teleports out of the scene, doesn't that like cost like millions of dollars when they mention something like that? Every time
in the comics, it's his sidekick who has been working with Robot. I'm sorry, I can't think of his name. He's the more portly fellow with the mustache. In the comics, he's directly speaking to that guy pretty much all the time. He's like his right-hand man. And the guy chides him and is like, that costs $6 million to the taxpayers every time you do it. And he's like,
yeah.
Cecil's like, yeah, but it's super fucking cool.
It is fucking cool.
Which it is, no doubt. Mark, what do you think about the fact that Adam Eve and Invincible Mark both go to the same high school?
Yeah, it's like the typical, superhero, nobody realizing their identity type shit. Because Adam Eve doesn't have any mask on, whatever, and she just goes to high school and she tells Mark like, yeah, nobody knows I'm Adam Eve, even though it's clearly her as Adam Eve without like anything covering her face.
What does she say? Like deniability is always the best. Like nobody ever believes that superheroes would be going to my high school.
Yeah. And I mean, it's got the high school dynamic. Obviously, it's the typical. Well, the first episode, Mark getting picked on by Todd, I think his name is, or whatever. And obviously, that is going to turn around quickly once he gets his powers, and he does, and kind of tells Todd to fuck off. But I think Mark, like I mentioned before in this episode, I think his whole personal life and being a high schooler and trying to juggle relationships with this girl, Amber, which we can talk about, who he likes that doesn't have superpowers. And then it seems like he has great chemistry with Adam Eve, who maybe something might happen later down the road. But it kind of reminded me of the relationship he has at home as well, where Adam Eve is kind of like his dad, Nolan. Where does he follow in those footsteps? Does he pursue that kind of life? Or does he, follow something more along the lines of his mom saying like, hey, you need to come back down to earth at points, and maybe he ends up pursuing things with Amber, who doesn't have, that aspect to her life.
So they changed Amber from the source material. I mean, not in any material way. Like it doesn't matter. It's just a little bit different character. They made her more of a strong female in this, who, I don't know, like has run-ins with a bully, and she ends up kicking the bully in the dick, as opposed to just like a girl who runs into Mark in the hallway at her high school. So I think that it's good they gave her more of a background at least. The high school thing, they do play on that when Mark shows up with Adam Eve, like to Rexplode, and Rexplode's like, oh, you conveniently go to the same school. Like Jason Mantzoukas was the most perfect voice they ever could have chosen for that guy, because he's just amazing. So ultra sarcastic and also stupid at the same time, and leans into it so well. It's perfect. So I'm very happy with that casting.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it in the first episode too. I forget when you said Jason Mantzoukas, I had to go back and like look at the cast, and I'm like, who is this guy? but he's from Parks and Rec, right? Isn't he the guy that owns, what does he own? Like a lotion company or some
No, he
random
owns
shit?
a cologne company.
Cologne
I mean,
company.
he's in everything. He's in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He was in The League. He's in
The League, yeah.
So
Yeah, I remember him that. He's just a
okay.
shithead in every role.
What do you think about William at this point, who is basically Mark's best friend? Because I'm kind of torn on this. He's much more involved in the comic book. That doesn't mean that he won't be more involved as the story goes along here. But I'm curious, like, what's the outsider's view on this?
Yeah, I didn't even really think about him. I think he had more of a presence in the first episode. Trying to think back, I should have probably rewatched the second episode right before we did this, but I wouldn't be surprised if he is the best friend that kind of helps him make decisions based on like morals and things like that. Like, is this the right thing to do kind of thing? And he'll go back to his best friend, and talk it out with him.
Let me give you the quick refresher. So Mark comes back after he finds out that Omni-Man's in the hospital, goes back to high school. William is basically trying to like flag him down the hallway. Mark is totally ignoring him. Eventually, Mark runs straight into him and has to explain like, hey, my dad was attacked.
Oh, yeah. And he's like, oh, man, are you okay? And doesn't it kind of end just there?
Yeah, they don't really explore that very much more. It's just kind of like, oh, damn. Yeah. Which I guess if you think
it's true, though. Like you would probably do the same thing if you had something tragic happen in your family. You wouldn't want to go into it, especially being like a teenage kid. Like you never wanted to talk about
you don't pry
with especially being a boy in high school. You don't really want to.
Yeah, I don't go down there. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So they kick the Flaxens out after they realize that basically they're getting old too fast. So everything.
Can we talk about one scene in that whole battle that I was like, holy shit. I wish like the boys does a great job at this. And sometimes you see things happen they're comic books, there'll always be comic books and the heroes are saving the day without anyone being injured, no civilians being injured. The fact that the grandma, Mark picks her up and fucking falls down into the ditch with her, and you just see like her leg is just snapped in half, her arm, like that's some realistic
covered
shit.
In blood. Like yeah,
if you were to pick up an old lady going, I'm assuming 80, 70 miles per hour, flying with her and then just hitting the dirt, she would be fucked up. And they do a great job at keeping that realism, of what would have probably happened if something like this went down.
That's what I thought was great is like that's Mark's first experience. It's like, oh fuck, I have to be gentle with these frail humans.
Yeah.
That's really good. So anyways, the Flaxens come back. Okay. So now they have had decades to prepare for everything that's coming in this battle. They assume that the teen team is who's going to be fighting them. So they're fully prepared for everybody who shows up. They have an answer for a robot. They have an answer for Adam Eve, Duplicate, and Rexplode. Like they just walk through Rexplode shit. Don't care. Things get grim, and Mark has a little freak out thing when Adam Eve is about to get murdered, like a bullet through the head type murdered. Do you think that's like foreshadowing for what's to come? Or do you think that was just like a one-time thing? And even Rexplode later on explains like, hey, just don't ever fucking aim that thing at me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's kind of obvious that Rexplode is the typical douchebag boyfriend who most likely won't stick around for too long. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mark and Adam Eve hit it off later on in the show.
We'll see.
But that's yet to be seen because we know we have Amber too. Like, where does he go? Which I love about this too. It's like high school problems, it's
will they, won't they? It's
will
real.
They, won't they?
Yeah. Okay. So this fight goes on for a little while, and you end up with the guy who Mark put his eye out by throwing a rock at him at the beginning of the episode. He shows up and all of a sudden he's like an elder and he's the leader. He's the leader of this battalion. and he says Braxe Moy or something like that, and they all attack. And Mark is on the ropes. This guy's about to kill Mark. Omni-Man to save the day
shows up and just fucking sweeps it up.
I think it's a very good comparison of the difference between Mark's powers at this point and Nolan, aka Omni-Man's powers at this point.
Yeah.
Like you know that they're both probably the two strongest people on the planet, but Omni-Man is still so leaps and bounds ahead of that.
Yeah, he's the veteran. He has the experience.
So we have this battle. Omni-Man pushes them all back, and he happens to follow them into their own dimension.
It's like, we're not done here yet, motherfuckers.
Ooh. What happens, Mark?
So Omni-Man just goes back to their planet, like just torturing him, absolutely messing with their heads. Like he's just telling them what to do. There was one scene where he's holding that big boulder, and he's just like, all right, you open the portal as I drop this on your whole civilization. I'm just like, oh my God. But there was one point and one thing he says that sticks out in these first two episodes. And he says, this is not, or he says something like, you thought you were going to conquer Earth. This is not yours to conquer.
Something I think like what he said was, Earth is not yours to conquer, which is, if you know Viltrum and their motivations, absolutely that's what's coming. I really hope that they draw Alan the Alien back into this type of stuff. And it's just a very good look at the savagery of the Viltrumites and the things that they will do basically just to eradicate an entire species of beings and destroy their planet just to be like, yeah, we're better than you.
Yeah.
In the comics, they have a basis that was basically like gladiators. It's like, okay, we're gonna have a battle now, and the loser shouldn't be ashamed. They were just too weak to live, and it's survival of the fittest. So they have that.
Leave it at that. Don't spoil it
very
too
much.
much.
They have that mentality. I thought it was extremely clear when Omni-Man was just ravaging that planet and destroying everything they ever loved.
Yeah. Yeah, he held nothing back, and you kind of see that more fucked up side of him, because in the first episode you start to think like, is there more to this? Is he's either just a complete psychopath, or there's something else going on where you don't want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but is there a reason why he brutally murdered all of these people of the superhero team?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because if you go back to him getting out of the hospital before he shows up for the second Flaxen battle, he's a real asshole to that nurse who has his costume. He's basically like, get me my fucking costume. I don't give a shit if it has tears. Like, it's like when you go to a restaurant and your parents are there and they treat the waiter like shit because they forgot your ketchup side.
Like, stop.
Yeah, like they're just trying to do their job. Cut them some slack. But I thought this was very important into showing how much Nolan is just a massive sociopath.
Yeah, he definitely.
I'm talking about your son, by the way, not.
Isn't that funny? Mark and Nolan in this household. I was like, damn, nice.
Give me your resounding thoughts after episode 2.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was boring in from my perspective. I thought there was a lot that happened that was important to the story. I mean, you kind of see how Mark deals with his powers and doing things amidst the battle. We get our first, other than the Guardians of the Globe in the episode 1, but we get our first battle with Mark, where Mark's involved with other team members of the team, and seeing how he reacts to certain things, and you get that chemistry he has with Adam Eve. And yeah, we get to see Omni-Man come back and just stay true to his asshole nature. Yeah, wreck shop in the Flaxen's planet. And I think it's important how they ended this one as well, even though it didn't go off. It didn't go off with quite as big of a bang as the first one did. But I forgot, like, I'm like, oh shit, nobody actually realizes, like, publicly that the Guardians of the Globe are dead. And that's how this one ends, is there's a news station that says, all right, all the Guardians of the Globe are now deceased.
Yeah.
And it ends there. So it's another great cliffhanger. And episode 3, I mean, we both watched it, but we'll talk about that probably tomorrow, right?
I am just so excited for the next episode of this. I can't
Love
fucking wait for more people to be talking about this and watching it. I think, again, this is just going to be like a slow burn for people to catch, like, not the show, but for people to catch up to what's actually happening and to realize this is a really good show. I've been trying to tell everybody about it. Can't say enough about it. I think this is so well done. And we'll see how it continues, but it's my favorite thing on TV right now.
Yeah,
we did forget to mention Damien Darkblood, who is the Hellboy detective carrier, as Jason says in the chat. I like that he speaks kind of like an idiot, but he's clearly not an idiot. Like, he's the only one who realizes for certain, that nobody else was there. No one else was there at the scene of the crime. And Cecil comes in and is like, there's a million super villains that say they can come and go as they please without leaving a trace. And Damien Darkblood's the one who's like, that's literally his line is, that's just what he does. So
he's going to figure shit out.
I can't wait for everybody else to realize more of this. I'm extremely excited to talk to more people about what goes on. But thank you for tuning in to our episode 2 recap of Invincible. Hopefully we'll be back tomorrow night for our 3rd episode. And then our goal is to be caught up by the end of this weekend. So by Sunday, we'll have episode 4 out. If you don't know us, we are Mark and Smithers from the Chumpcast. You can find us on all social media platforms at the Chumpcast. You can also listen to our podcast wherever you find your fine podcasts. Did I miss anything?
No. I think we're good. We'll see you guys back here and probably tomorrow. Episode 3, baby. Jumps out, motherfucker.